Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Thursday. A lot of news to cover. Our good friend, Dr. David Allen White, joined the Angels on Monday, and I'll celebrate his life at the end of this hour. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was confirmed as Health and Human Services Secretary. I'll get to that. But I want to begin with Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Vice Admiral Montgomery returns. Not very long ago he was here talking about defense modernization. But I asked him this morning if he would come and join me for half an hour because of a story I was sent this morning by a Marine Corps general, retired, about the launch of the new Fujian carrier by China and the fifth generation fighter it is deploying, the J-35. And I thought, oh my, what's this mean? And Admiral Montgomery showed up. Thank you, Admiral. Where are you today?
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks for having me. I'm in Honolulu. I'm at the Honolulu Defense Forum, a security discussion hosted by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command with a lot of our allies and partners out here in the Pacific.
I'm glad to see you dressed appropriately. The first time I went over there as a lawyer, I was dressed in full howley, wearing a tie and a coat. Boy, did I stand out. So I'm glad you dressed appropriately. Admiral, first of all, your reaction to that story that I sent you. Maybe you already knew about the Fujian and the F-35, or their J-35 fifth generation fighter, but I didn't. What'd you think?
Well, I have to resist the snarky answer, which is, boy, just another target for U.S. attack submarines, and recognize that the real key to this story is the indication of just how much stronger Chinese shipbuilding is than American shipbuilding. And this is both in merchant marines, where you get these incredible numbers, like they build 230 times more merchant ships than
Wow.
we do each year. But also in naval shipbuilding, where the numbers are more like 7, 6, 7, 8 to 1 in terms of tonnage per year. But they're outperforming us there as well, which is why Senator Wicker has pretty wisely put a lot of his chips down on fixing the American shipbuilding problem.
Now, Admiral, before I come back to the carrier and submarines, one of the few people who've focused on that, I mean, you have, Captain Jerry Hendricks has, Mike Gallagher did, Tom Cotton does. One of the few people who is always talking about it is Elbridge Colby. He's been nominated to be the Undersecretary of Defense, and there are some anonymous, I don't even know if these senators are actually exist or if they're made up by the Hill, chirping at Elbridge Colby, trying to sink that ship before it sails. What do you make of that resistance to Bridge Colby?
So first, we've had a relationship for 15 years where we've usually been friends. We've had some disagreements over support to Ukraine, where I think it's necessary as part of an overall deterrence efforts, and even sometimes about the specificity of our support for Taiwan. But I want to say this: Bridge Colby, he's a patriot. He's a smart guy. He is, of the people I've seen eligible for this, he is the right guy to go into this job. Look, I disagree with him on Ukraine, but that's not his decision. That's going to be the president's decision. I think and I disagree sometimes on how much to support Taiwan, but again, that's not going to be his decision. I think having someone who's been outward and vocal and speaks, what he believes to be the truth is the right kind of person to have in this kind of job. So, look, we don't agree on everything, but I didn't agree on everything with the Biden administration. That's for certain. I think it's inappropriate for him to be chipped away like this. If people want to criticize him, they should come right out front and say it, sir, not behind his back anonymously with the Hill.
That's what makes me crazy. And I really do want an eloquent, smart person who can articulate a position and argue it out with senators if he wants to argue it out. But a China first policy, China's the pacing threat. It's so obvious to me. And I don't know what the right solution is. Like you just said, I like supporting Ukraine fully so that we get Putin to the table. But attacking Bridge Colby is out of line. And if any Republican votes against him, I think they're going to get blowback, a lot of blowback. Now, Admiral, what I asked you in my email this morning is, if they've got this new carrier and this new J-35, we need attack submarines. We need a lot of them. How many do we have? How critical is our shortage or readiness, and how do we fix that?
So we have, it changes week to week with commissionings and decommissionings. It doesn't happen that often, but it changes over months. We have around just over 50. We're on a decline right now where we're decommissioning 2 to 3 a year, and we're building 1.2 a year. So we are headed down towards 47, 48. And by the way, it could have been 42 or 43, but actions were taken during the last Trump administration to kind of arrest that. The reason I say that is if you ask what's the wargaming number of total submarines to generate the submarines you need for it, it's probably 69 or 70. So I told you we had 50, 52,
Whoa.
not 70. That's a significant shortfall that will be felt on day 1, day 7, day 28, day 42 of this conflict. So we're going to need to build more submarines. As you know, we're aiming for 3.0, we're paying for 2.0, and we're getting 1.2 submarines per year. These are attack submarines. And I don't see that number changing aggressively over the next 3 to 4 years. We can take aggressive up steps now, so it changes aggressively 4 or 5 years from now.
Now, Admiral, for the benefit of the Steelers fans, will you describe the state of our best attack submarine and what it can do vis-a-vis, for example, these carriers? And I keep in mind the wonderful book from the Cold War, Blind Man's Bluff. And we used to follow around the Russian subs and the Russian stuff, all the Soviet stuff, and they didn't even know we were there. We cut cables or tapped into cables. They didn't know we were there. What can the Virginia class do vis-a-vis the PLAN ships and submarines?
So I believe the Virginia class and the later Los Angeles class, that's our older ships, are significantly better than their Chinese counterparts and better than their Russian counterparts. And that's important. We have a significant asymmetric advantage in undersea warfare. And they're not just better than their submarines, they're able to avoid detection by their aircraft and ships. That all goes together. So submarines are part of any, when I wrote our war plans for 3 or 4 years in Indo-Pacific Command, they're a big part of it. I will say this, submarine warfare is inherently deliberate and slow warfare. Submarines do not move around like the Star Trek Enterprise at warp speed. They move around in a combat environment at much lower speeds, in what we've seen on terrain is 10 to 20 miles an hour. And with the vast ocean east of Taiwan, where their target set is, it's going to take them days or weeks or a month to get rid of all the targets. And so not having 70 and instead having 50, which gets you, obviously these both get you lower numbers on station, not having the right number means that these ships are going to go even slower in their job. And this is a time-sensitive action that's going on. So it really does matter that we don't have enough of these submarines that are otherwise kind of butt-kicking U.S. tools of power.
When we say we've got 50, some are in the yards, some have not been repaired. Is it classified? I don't have any idea. How many are forward deployed into that area of the world?
So what's classified as how many are forward deployed. We know that we forward station 5 submarines in Guam. That number can sometimes be 4, sometimes be 6. It's 5 growing to 6 permanently. What that means is those families, and the ships operate exclusively out of Japan. They do their testing and maintenance and training, in Guam, testing, maintenance, and training in Guam. And the families actually live with their sailors in Guam. Now, the number that have come from San Diego or Hawaii and are forward deployed at any one time, that number is classified. But you can imagine it's a low number if things generally rotate in the Navy on a 6 months on, 18 months off kind of flow. You don't have that many forward.
So in terms of the ability to find and sink capital ships of the People's Liberation Army Navy, do we have enough right now to deter China from doing anything short of full-out war, which would include hypersonic missiles and whatever else China wants to throw at us?
So, when I think about that kind of worst case scenario of a China executing a cross-strait invasion and us having to push back on it, the bad news is we don't have enough submarines. The good news is we fight as a joint force. And that joint force includes other elements of the Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps, Space Force. But the key elements to this are going to be Navy submarines, followed by Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps aviation, dropping anti-ship cruise missiles and anti-ship weapons on the Chinese, and then Army and Marine Corps launching ground-based weapons from either Japan, the Philippines, or maybe someday Taiwan itself. And this is all joined by Taiwan doing the same thing, ground, air, and naval. When we add that all together, Hugh, I still think we're at that point where we're not at 2027 yet. In fact, 2027 being the putative year where China might be able to conduct this and we may not be able to stop it. I actually think over the last, starting with the Trump 45 and some investments in Biden administration, we've actually moved that to the right. So it's now 2029, 2030. So the long answer, or the short answer, Hugh, is we can do it as long as we have things besides submarines, and we have things besides submarines.
I'm going to continue talking with Admiral Montgomery during the break. Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. He'll come back after the break because I really do want to focus on this one question of our submarine capacity and drive it home. Put it on YouTube, let everyone see it. Stand by. I'll be right back with you, Admiral. I am back with Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Admiral, my wife's grandfather was fired by FDR because he testified to the Senate that Imperial Japan might strike the United States. And so Admiral Tausig was cashiered. Has anyone stepped up to say, basically, China might actually try a surprise attack on us?
So I haven't heard anyone say a surprise attack. I do know one of my deputies when I was at Indo-PACOM eventually became an Air Force 4-star named Mike Minahan, General Mike Minahan, who's head of Air Mobility Command. And kind of famously, 18 months ago, he said very publicly, we have to be ready for China in 2025. We need to be more aggressive, more warfighterly. He was speaking to his Air Mobility Command personnel. I think he was told, hey, knock it off. He then issued 6 months later a memo that said, hey, what I said before, I mean it. Get out there, be ready to fight. So it wasn't so much that he was going to Congress, but his internal transmission, which was leaked externally and got in the press, was we have to be more ready. We have to be more aggressive. I would say he was retired one job early, and wasn't the U.S. Transportation Command commander because of his frank talk about the Chinese threat.
No, there is a corollary then. All right, I got to go look that up. Second question. I heard a former CNO, and I'm not sure, I can't remember if it was off the record or on the record, so I'm not going to tell you which one, give a speech. Jerry Hendricks was there to give another speech. And the former CNO said at the beginning of World War II, our submarine captains were woefully unprepared for actual combat. And that he warned, do we have people who are warfighters in those boats? What do you think?
So I think things have changed. Do I think there's still risk that there will be some captains found wanting in combat? Yes. Do I think that risk is as high as 1941? No. Part of it is the quality and amount of training we bring to the warfighter now. When you go to a place like Top Gun out at Fallon in Nevada, the degree to which the F-18 pilots can first fight a game in a simulator, fight each other in a simulator, practice a long-range strike with an adversary around them in a simulator, and then go fly it out on a range with high-performance aircraft going against them. We've all seen the movies. We all know that. I'm telling you, the same thing now exists in the surface force for the surface ship commanders and in the submarines, and that's brought together in joint tactical training exercises that really emphasize the speed and challenge and the lack of information. You still got to make a decision. That's what paralyzed some of our COs in 1941. So there's that part. The second part was a lot of our stuff didn't work. Our torpedoes were awful at the beginning of World War II. And I think we're doing a better job operationally testing them. Now, the Red Sea, the Houthis have given us a free test of all those anti-ship cruise missile, all our systems are shooting down cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. We're doing great. So what I'd say is there a risk for a micro level of that problem? Yes. Is there a risk of the macro level that we really experienced in spring of 1942? No.
All right, I'm coming right back on the full network with Admiral Montgomery. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. I emailed Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy, early this morning after I read the story about the new Chinese carrier and the fifth-generation fighter. I thought he was in the Beltway, and instead he's in Hawaii. So I hope I didn't wake up, Admiral. But I laid out a very easy challenge. Can you lay out for my audience what we need to do step by step and in how quickly in order to retain dominance of the underwater realm and have enough Virginia attack submarines to deter a Chinese attack? And it really is, we got 8 minutes for you. Hold forth. You get 8 minutes to educate people on what we need to do now.
Well, thank you for having me to talk about this, because the right person is our mutual friend, Dr. Jerry Hendricks, retired Navy captain, but he's been pulled lured into the White House working for Mike Waltz on exactly this issue. So I'll tell you, step one was hire Jerry Hendricks to try to figure it out. I think they got that one checked. Okay, so step two is you have to resource this properly. And look, our ship, you and I've had this discussion. If you spend 4.5 to 5.5% of our gross domestic product on defense during the Cold War, it it dropped precipitously after the Cold War, and then continued to drop through the Obama administration from 4.5% to 3%. President Trump bumped it back up. Under President Biden, it went back down. It is currently 3.02%. So when President Trump tells the Europeans, you better get to 3 and you better start thinking about 5, I also think there's a value in a mirror in that discussion, because we need to do the same thing. We need to get ourselves from 3% to 3.5% by the end of the Trump 47 and 4% by the end of the next administration after that, because you can't raise it quite that fast. That's talking about bumping in your base budget 40 billion a year. Why do I say you have to start with a big answer like that, Hugh? Because that is what gives you the resources to restore your shipbuilding. That's how bad shipbuilding is. It will take a chunk, about 40% of any of that increase needs to go to the shipbuilding budgets, and it needs to go to getting the people, technology, and processes right at our submarine shipyards that do both new construction and do the repairs. Because you kind of alluded to it in a previous discussion, that we don't have a lot of our ships are out of service because they're waiting to be maintained. So we're going to have to put that money into both production and repair of submarines. And I got to tell you, one of the big kickers in this is people. It's having enough STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, educated workforce willing to leave high school or community college and go into the defense industrial base to be welders, to be ship fitters, to be electricians, to build these boats in Connecticut and in Virginia. And we've got to get that STEM workforce right. It's not right. The shipyards aren't ready construction wise to do it. The workforce isn't ready to execute it. We've got to make those investments. That's why the investments we make today will not make 2026 a better warfight. They won't make 2027 a better warfight, but they might make 2030 a better warfight.
So, do we also need expansion of those two submarine building and maintenance facilities? And do we open a third and a fourth, or do we have Australia build them, or South Korea or Japan build them?
So on nuclear submarines, I would say the answer is yes to expanding the two new construction ones. Yes to considering other shipyards to provide the parts. A lot of this is built modularly. So when I say you might need a third shipyard, it might not be for the fitting, final outfit, and launching. That might still just be at two shipyards. But we're already starting to see other shipyards compete for nuclear work on the nuclear submarines that is then shipped to Virginia and Connecticut. Okay, the reason that's important is I don't think you can get to 3.0 on the current footprints at those two yards, considering that we're also building nuclear aircraft carriers down in Virginia. So with all that said, it's a qualified yes. More shipyards involved, probably not doing the final outfitting. Australia is also a yes. I think South Korea and we already kind of have that deal. I'm hoping President Trump locks that in. So Senator Wicker's talking to him about that. Get the full AUKUS deal of we transfer you some Virginia class and you build new ones there, and you help us get our shipbuilding back in line with investments. Final thing I'd say is Japan and Korea can help us with auxiliary ships, I think, and the construction of the MS military sea lift command ships and the oilers and the other things. I think that's a much more likely assignment for them should we want to give an assignment out to a good ally like Japan or Korea.
Okay, so my very last question, Admiral, and thank you for spending this much time. Can we defend those shipyards? I know the president's talking about strategic defense, and Israel has the Iron Beam coming up. Can we actually defend Virginia and Connecticut? I think are those things that we can make sure, both from external threat and from sabotage and theft?
So yes, but we need to make investments. Look, I think the UAS, the drone problem around them, is more espionage than nefarious attack. But we're going to need to get that right. More broadly, I spoke about Iron Dome last week, and the idea that we really do have to get the investments right in that against an actual attack from China or Russia. So I do think so. But look, we do have to treat these yards. I mean, they're like fort. I mean, they are like military forts to us. They're as important as any military fort or naval base or Air Force base in America. They are. We have to look at the defense industrial base as part of the team. They're not adversarial. They are part and parcel. The American warfighting arsenal of democracy, and they're patriots, but they do need to do the physical and cybersecurity that's necessary to defend these key critical assets.
Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you for spending time with me. I have no idea what time it is in Hawaii, but I appreciate your breaking out from your day to educate the audience. We'll put this up on the YouTube channel as well, so it can travel far and wide. And look forward to talking to you when you're back from your travels, and update me on what all those people that you're with are saying off the record and in the corner, which is where all the real talking gets done. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you for having me, sir.